Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello everyone, welcome back to NPTEL online course on research methodology for planning and architectural studies. So far we have discussed the research process and also we have discussed different components of it. In our previous lectures we have discussed about the research writing, and which is one of the important part of the whole research journey, that how you write your research. Now, in that particular case, if you recall that while discussing the research process, we discussed about different stages, and one of the critical stage is the literature review part, reviewing the literature, reviewing the past studies. So, now we will be discussing in this particular module about different types of literature review, why it is important for a researcher to do the literature review, and then how we can do it effectively. So, with certain live demonstration of some useful tools that can help you to the literature review to the full extent. So, I am going to show you. So, without any further delay, let us start our lecture number 11, that is basics of literature review. So, in this particular lecture, what we aim to learn, first of all, as already we know that literature review is one of the component. After defining your problem, you have to go for a extensive literature review to understand what has been done in your domain. So, we will try to understand the meaning of literature review, then why it is required for a researcher to conduct the literature review very sincerely and very effectively. Then we will discuss about general steps in literature review that you follow, and there are many ways that you can do the review. Then selection of literature sources, that what are the possible sources from where we can do this particular review. It is not always that we only review the journals which are available online or maybe in the library. There might be other few sources, authentic sources that we need to refer for our review purpose. Then we briefly discuss about the type of review, literature review, and then we will take up those things in detail in our follow up lectures, and we will summarize our learning at the end of this presentation. Now, in this case, what is actually the literature review? So, let us understand from the researcher's point of view. It is the work that you do, it is not done in a vacuum. So, that means whatever we are doing, it is not abruptly we just start thinking of something in air and there is no such kind of basis, but rather it builds on the ideas of other people who have studied the field before you. So, something has been done somewhere and then there is some sort of idea or concept. So, you have to build your idea on that kind of particular domain, and then in this case you have to make a progress. It is not that reiterating the same idea again and again. So, for that reason you need to read, understand and describe what has been published so far, and for that you need to go through different kind of literature sources which will help you to marshal yourself with the information in a relevant and critical way. So, in short, if I just try to describe this particular statement, that whatever research topic that you are thinking, there should be a basis, something somewhere, not maybe in your region or not maybe in your institution, or maybe it is not in the country that you are doing the research. There is some thought process, there is a certain concept that has been done, and then you just make that particular review to understand what has been done, and then try to identify the gap in it, that okay, in that literature this component has been taken into consideration, but there are certain points around it which is untouched, and then probably that can give you a good research gap and few research questions you can develop upon it. So, for that you need to read and understand it properly, and you have to do it very systematically. Many a times this is just many a times we ignore that literature review component, because see, reading so many of technical articles, sometimes maybe you just take up one particular journal and you start reading, and after say first paragraph you will see some of the unknown formula, and then you find that the paper is very complex, and then probably that demotivates you to read it further. So, many times like we have such kind of feeling that okay, so maybe like why to read other papers, I can write in good English or I can write my research. So, probably that is not the good idea. If there is complexity, as because when you start literature review at your early stage of your research career, so probably some things may be unknown to you. It may be the method that first time you are hearing from that paper. So, you do not need to get tensed, or you do not need to get scared that okay, the paper is very complex. So, some of the component, like at least you know what is the objective of the paper, what actually you can say that the research question that has been addressed in the paper, you try to get it, and the moment like you start reading it, the more you involve yourself into research and try to understand different methods, then probably all those complex formula will become little familiar to you when you see it, or maybe you will find certain kind of clue that okay, this formula or this method has been referred from a book. So, you go through that book, you go through such kind of description available in different digital forum, and then probably that will give you the confidence. So, there is no alternative to this, that okay, you can skip this particular literature review for your thesis, because in that case you will be like in such situation, probably the things that you are proposing, or the result that you are bringing in, probably similar kind of thing has been already done, or else such kind of things are not like accepted in the research community. So, it is always better to be patient, and then you can take some time out to do the literature review in a significant way. Let us have another concept of that. What is literature review? It is an academic document which must have a logical structure. The aim, objective and purpose need to be clear to the reader. It must be an appropriate summary of previous work, but it needs an added dimension, that is your interpretation. So, all these words that I made bold, it has a value. Like definitely literature review does not mean that okay, somebody asks you to just review 20 papers and just write a summary of it. It is not exactly the review. Okay, maybe that can give you some pages of your thesis as literature review chapter, but essentially that will not lead to any such kind of conclusion. First of all, you have to understand why you are going to do the literature review. What is the aim of doing it? Is it the aim to identify the gap in literature, or you are doing literature review to identify the suitable methods that can help you in your research? So, purpose of doing the literature review can be something like at the initial stage, or maybe to identify the data collection method, or maybe it is just to compare your result with the past study. So, at different stages, as already we discussed in the last lecture, that we will go through the literature and then try to identify. So, we have to identify the aim, objective and purpose, and then we start and we make the structuring. So, there should be a good flow, because this is some kind of storytelling of what has been done in that field in a logical manner, but it is just not merely the reporting, but also you need to interpret. You have to also add your value, that okay, for a particular phenomena, a group of researchers, they are saying for it and somebody are against it. That say for example, I give you one such example from research on park and ride. So, park and ride is a concept facility where people for the first mile they use their vehicles to reach to the public transport station and then park their vehicle on that particular station, and then maximum of his or her journey will be made in public transportation. So, obviously the aim is it will reduce the overall vehicular emission, and that will be good for reducing congestion. So, this is one particular part. Okay, a researcher they are saying about all the positive aspect of it, but a group of researchers also criticize it, that the moment you encourage people to use their car even for the few miles to access the station, so probably there will be huge increase in the car in the local neighborhood, like at least in the station area, and that can lead to a issue with the parking management. So, that is another negative aspect of this. But again when as a researcher you are reading it, you have to give value to both the aspect and try to bring your interpretation and make certain kind of trade off in all such kind of decision making. So, your interpretation is very important for this aspect. Now, coming to the literature review, what does it mean? It is definitely a methodical exploration and also the critical assessment of the existing scholarly work on a particular topic. It is not abruptly you search for any journal. First you decide your topic, that I want to do something on say transit oriented development, or I want to do something on the blue green infrastructure or climate resilience aspect, or maybe something like I want to do some kind of building performance simulation and try to see alternative materials for the low cost housing. So, in all such aspect, first you decide a topic and then accordingly you try to search those kind of published article. This can be just journal, it can be good conference proceedings, it can be a patent, it can be a good book. So, all those kind of valid and authentic document where you can trust upon. So, how to trust upon? Definitely for that you need to rely on good journals, because the moment you take up one good journal, okay, from a good paper from a good journal, then the authenticity of that particular journal will be really high, because it is being done or gone through a peer review process. So, the values or the idea that has been reported is checked. So, you can actually take up. So, that is why selecting a good paper or selecting a good journal from where you will take up your paper for review is equally important. It involves summarizing of the results, synthesizing, go deep into understand what exactly it is being told. This review can be done in a qualitative manner, and sometimes even we will discuss in the later slides and also a detailed presentation on that, something called meta analysis. So, this is another part of review of literature, where we do some sort of analysis with the quantitative findings of the paper to understand the effect size and all. So, we will discuss that there. Then evaluate the existing knowledge to provide comprehensive overview of the current state of art. So, you will get to know that okay, whatever you are thinking as a problem, it is a problem so far. It is not being addressed adequately in the literature, and there is still a gap, because maybe it may happen that the very first day you just initiate one idea, and after doing a systematic review, then you will find that okay, so this area has been explored enough. So, probably I have to narrow down or fine tune my idea to take up my research topic. Now, it must follow a logical structure and aimed at answering a clearly defined research question through the analysis of existing literature. So, whatever you say that is the factors. So, you want to identify the factors affecting the sustainable growth in a rural area. So, what are the different factors that are being studied in the past literature. So, across different literature, if you find something is very common, so you will have the confidence that these are the main factors that also you need to consider for your study. If you find that in some studies specifically they have mentioned about a factor and that is not being mentioned in any other paper, so probably that is one of the interesting aspect. You can look into that why that factor was added by the researcher. Then if you find it logical, so you can also bring that into your research, or else you try to also find out some of the aspect that you find that okay, probably these are not being discussed in literature, but it is very much contextual. So, we should include it. So, inclusion and exclusion of all those factors and all, so that you need to do through the literature review. Now, why it is needed? To understand the evolution of ideas in the field, that what has been done in a from is genesis to that particular present day, that how it evolved. To identify the gaps in current knowledge. So, many times nowadays I also encourage my students that whatever research you are doing a literature review. So, try to develop a review paper, because that is going to give you a confidence on the knowledge that already available in our extant literature. So, during that process you will try to identify that present state of art in that particular domain, and then also the gap. So, where you can tap and you can take up the objectives out of that particular gap, which will seriously contribute to this existing body of literature. To provide a context for further research. So, once you have clearly identified gap, you can go for this research. In research, we seek to make an original contribution to the knowledge, that is one of the main criteria. The literature review is where you show that you are both aware of the existing literature and can also interpret what is already known. So, you have a sound knowledge that the past study they have done. So, you know about it. It is not just remembering how many papers you reviewed, what they have done, you should have that particular understanding. And then by that you are able to point out the contradiction and the gaps. So, many a times it may happen that the findings that you are achieving at and the findings that already being reported, they are similar, or sometimes they are contradictory. That contradiction may happen due to some spatial variation, due to some temporal variation. A study has been done 10 years ago on certain socio-economic aspect, and today you are doing similar kind of thing in the present day context. So, in last 10 years or 15 years gap may change some of the dynamics of the socio-economic pattern, or maybe the spatial pattern. So, which may give you some kind of contrast in the findings, or maybe if you find something is very similar, the perception is similar, like what was the perception before and after, it is same. Say for example, I give you this thing like that was very well discussed in many forum and all, that in 2020 early 20 when this pandemic started, and then there was certain series of lockdown unlock situation. So, there was certain kind of boost in some of the e-commerce, like we used to order online the food and other things. So, earlier people also used to do it, but even for the common people like who never experienced such kind of thing, they also had to do. So, all like cashless payments and ordering online food, your other utilities, etc., etc. So, those kind of things has been changed. Even if you say take the example of this particular online teaching, which was not that frequent activity in most of the cases, but we adopted that, we understood certain kind of drawbacks in online teaching, but still there are certain kind of good points that also we understood. So, in all such cases, like if study now something to be conducted, that the perception of online teaching or online shopping before and after COVID. So, there might be some kind of contrast that probably people now have more faith on that kind of UPI payment and all. So, people now are using their smartphone or other gadget to make the payment very effectively. Earlier probably it was something like having some sort of doubts. So, like that, this is something very important to report, that the findings, the changes, because that is going to give a direction that okay, maybe in the marketing research a company can launch a new product based on customer satisfaction, or maybe in some cases like if we understand the aspiration of say people in a rural area. So, accordingly we can think of a rural development plan. So, such kind of things are required. Now, after identifying the existing knowledge, so that can also give you a new dimension of fresh perspective. So, that is something if you have already done this literature review in a sincere way and a systematic way, so you will get a different idea as well. So, whatever probably your thought process or overall idea about the research before conducting the literature review, and now after doing it, there will be some sort of differences. Now, importance of literature review, that it informs research design. So, it will definitely guide you to formulate your research questions and hypotheses, because research questions are based on research gap, and gap is only be understood when you have a thorough knowledge of what is available. So, normally the research gap you can say that what is required minus what is existing. So, that is the gap. So, for that like what you can formulate your research questions out of the research gap that you identified through the literature review. This is another important aspect, that through literature review you can avoid the duplication of the idea or duplication of the work. So, if we do not do any literature review, start working, and then after getting our results and all, while writing the paper we will find that okay, this is similar to the paper already existing. So, all of your efforts, your energy, your intellectuals now will have no such value. So, for that it is very important. So, it will ensure that proposed research is not duplicating the existing work. Now, you can develop certain idea, you can advance that concept what is existing, but you should not involve yourself in duplicating the exactly same research. It will also strengthen the credibility. How? That it will demonstrate the researcher's familiarity with the existing literature, and that is the credibility. Suppose if you are approaching to any interview or any presentation, okay, and you are just describing your work, and somebody may ask that do you aware of this particular fact which has been done earlier. So, if you have done a very good and systematic review of existing literature, the answer will be known to you. You can say that okay, yes, I am aware of this fact, and there that was the problem, and then that is something that I thought to investigate further, and that is something, and how this is different from the existing literature. So, this is something will increase your strength, and also like the more you read, that you will get that kind of knowledge. If you have the habit of reading books, so whatever it may be a science fiction, it may be some kind of historical or mythological story, everything will have certain impact. The more you read, then you have more knowledge about it. Now, how to use that knowledge, that is also dependent on your way you portray it, how you code that particular knowledge in the discussion part. Now, general steps in literature review, because these steps is something like which is followed the any way you do the review, but later on when we discuss in detail different types of literature review, this particular steps may change little bit, but this is much more of a generalized step. Now, let us focus on it. First, selecting research questions for review. So, this research question is a broad question, that okay, is there any work that has been done in the field, or is there any factors that are influencing this kind of phenomena. So, this kind of initial questions that you should have. Then after that you have to select the sources of data, that can be bibliographic or that can be some kind of article database. So, bibliographic database is just only you have the titles, you have just the information overall, it will not tell you about the content. So, you just search on a topic and you see that there are different kind of topics, but what is inside that will not be part of the bibliographic part. So, but if you go for the detailing the article database and all, you get it. Then website information, sometimes you may get it like some information which is published, some report, some good article, editorial. So, that can also help you, and other reliable sources. Next is the choosing of the search terms, what to search. So, this is something I say that many a times we researcher we do not know exactly how to search, and many a times we just search with certain thing and we are not getting it, and then we approach to our teacher that nothing is available, and probably the teacher will do the search and will show us that see there are things available. So, what is the difference between these two, because it is the open search engine. So, it is all about the keyword that you are putting into it. So, if you are working, say for example, want to do something on the community resilience approach to some kind of flood prevention or something. So, in such cases what you will search, if you search the entire string, probably you will not getting the adequate result. So, probably in that case you want to search in segment, like maybe you can say the flood resilience, or it may be say community perception or community participation, and then sequentially you will end up with certain findings. So, there is some way you can do. So, even in Google when you search something, so you can use the plus, or sometimes you can say the and or like this. So, whenever you say and string into the search, that means the content should have this as well as this. You can also use that that is something called or. So, in this case either this or this, when you have multiple search together you can use this kind of or option, and sometimes if you want that I want this but not this, so you can also use the not comment like that. So, keyword that fetch the most relevant articles from the database. So, for that, for researcher we should know that what are the available database. Some of them definitely need subscription, but there are plenty other sources where you can get it like without subscription. Only what you need a stable internet connection to get it. Otherwise, like nowadays it is becoming very easy. Like probably 20 years ago, mostly like people had to rely on those kind of printed journal and all, but now things are available online. After that, it can show you say x number of papers, but probably x number of papers are not required, or maybe they are not exactly what you actually wanted. Say if you say that you want to do something in architecture. So, what is architecture? So, for the architects, architecture is something like related to the designing, the built form, etc. These are different keywords. At the same time, if you search architecture, so even in the computer science they use that IT architecture or something like some design, they have this kind of architecture. So, you end up with, if you simply search the architecture, it will also give you some paper in kind of chip design or maybe IT architecture. So, their architecture means it is a total kind of system in a total system and subsystem of that. So, for such kind of cases definitely you have to add more information into the search string, or else you have to remove some of or you have to filter it out, so that you get it in exact what you want. So, this can be like based on the type of article, that we only want to see the journal, not the review paper. It is only the base journal, top cited journal. It can be the language that I can fit only the English or Hindi or anything, any other language that we want to do. Then date of publication, sometimes that I am not really bothered about like the research paper that being published 20 years ago, because that time probably things were different. So, I want to see the recent trends, so I can filter it out for last 5 years. Number of citations, we can see that okay, if a paper is cited too many times, so this is very important paper for us. Location, which will give some context, so that you can compare that okay, within the location there is the papers that are talking about similar thing. Applying methodological screening criteria, that you have some inclusion and exclusion criteria to judge the relevance of this. So, probably in that case further fine tuning, okay, you have given some filter that okay, this is the papers that are being published in last 5 years. Now, you give some more thing that this paper should have this inclusion. It is looking at the title, probably it is okay, but looking at the abstract it is not relevant. So, you can remove that. And finally, you select the articles or the document, research document that you do the review. This is basically the methodology as per the selected type of review, whether you go for bibliometric analysis or it may be a meta analysis or it may be some other type of traditional way that reporting. So, then you do. So, that means in this particular case with a larger set of information, you have to pick the best suited information and which are required. Then you just go for a detailed review of those, rather than reviewing. Say if you search with an overall term called say pedestrian facility, you may end up with 20,000 papers. So, 20,000 papers, if you start reading even one paper or say two papers or maybe even if you are very like good at reading. So, if it is 20,000 and then you have say almost say 5 papers a day. So, you need around 4,000 days to review. So, that is not possible. So, probably some of them are repetitive, there are certain kind of obsolescence on certain ideas. So, you have to narrow it down, right. Then finally, synthesizing the results which will help you that okay, this is something the phenomena, the relation between this population growth and the urbanization, it is positive. So, okay, you can take up that as some sort of relationship and you can bring out certain kind of other perspective into it. Now, selecting research questions, for that first we formulate the draft research questions, search for the information with the keyword, then we just quickly go through, we skim, then scan, read and reflect and understand the key concept, reading the abstract, reading the conclusion, not going into detail of the methodology at this stage. Then in this case you again reassess your draft question and finally you make your research questions depending on the gap. So, it is all started with like something very open ended, broad, and then you are narrowing down as you progress. So, end of a successful review of literature, you will be confident enough to take up your research questions very effectively based on the gap in the existing body of literature. Now, selecting the source of data. So, we have Web of Science source, and the good point is that to access the database it is free as of now. Then Scopus, it needs subscription, and then you have something called PubMed, medical related research, and other research also you can get it here. You have ProQuest and then Google Scholar. So, this is also the free database. So, in this case they are not distinctly different, these are different search engine, but definitely for Web of Science and Scopus there are certain criteria. You will only get those papers which are Scopus indexed in Scopus or Web of Science indexed in Web of Science, but Google Scholar is something where you can get mix of the thing. So, for the researcher who will not have access to this Scopus or maybe finding difficult in Clarivate, to start with even the Google Scholar is going to help you. Now, I am showing you just few snapshot how to do the search in the Web of Science. So, as already I mentioned, it does not require any such kind of subscription. You just need to register yourself with your email ID, and then in that case this is called Web of Knowledge. If you type in Google, you will end up with this kind of interface, and where you can have different type of search. You can search the topic, you can search the author, you can search all such kind of search string that you can think of, the location, you can say the publication, journal, and then you can type the initial few letters and it can prompt you to search. So, whatever is in this database, so this is also a huge database, so you will get this information. Now, in this case definitely there are certain kind of search that you can say that you want to search something on local or indigenous or vernacular. These are like any of them will work, and architecture or building or construction. So, it can be local architecture, it can be indigenous architecture, it can be local building, indigenous building, local construction, indigenous construction. So, and is means both of them should be there, or means either of them will work and you prompt the search. So, you just put it over there in such way. So, these are some of the operators that are very useful, and as I already mentioned that you can add not, which may exclude from the keyword, and then it will not give you that kind of phase. If a paper will have say local architecture and another terms which you want to omit or you do not want to see, so you can put not on that comment and you search. And then you can see that okay, so in it is showing you 1,18,796 records. So, definitely it is a huge thing. Then you can go for filtering it, you can say publication years, type of document, language, which country you refer to. If you want to focus on a typical country or some place, you can do affiliation. If you want to see some institution that you are focusing on, research area, publication title, means it is a journal, only I want to review the paper published in journal XYZ. So, you can do that. After that, what you can do, that you have that option called export that finding. So, you can export that overall findings in a .csv format, which is a comma separated option. So, you can open it in Excel, or you have other RIS format and other way you can go for beep text, you can go for refworks, etc. And then you can also make those kind of filtering, that publication between this to this and all. And then finally, you can say that after applying filter, so that huge number of previously what we discussed, that 1,18,000, so it come to the 1653. So, this is again you can filter further to get the most important paper, because it is nothing but in this search, it is not a magical thing that is happening, it is just about some of the keyword search through the text operator. So, you are getting those information. Now, filtering it out to find out the most important one is the next step. So, in the methodological screening, you have the clear inclusion criteria and exclusion criteria, and also you go for most relevant research question. To achieve to that part, you need to have this kind of inclusion exclusion criteria. Then in this particular case, you can first look at the title and abstract. When it is done, then you can apply the exclusion criteria must be excluded and inclusion criteria must be included to identify the most important aspect. So, as I say that okay, this should have this component, this should not have this component. So, this is very important. So, this is general workflow for review and might vary in dealing with the process based on type of review to be conducted. So, it is very generic, definitely it will depend on the type of review that you are adopting. So, after that what you need to do, the records from all relevant sources are screened and then you start reviewing it, finalize your list of papers that you want to review, and then again in this case your result and other synthesis of the literature will be depend on type of review in your research. Now, with that we are coming towards end of this first lecture on literature review, the basics of literature review. There are different ways that we can do. One is the traditional literature review, which can be narrative review or critical review, that okay, in this case we just go one by one and just from one paper to another paper we look at the cross reference and then start writing it. It can be systematic literature review where I will show you how to do it. Then we can go for meta analysis, we can also go for bibliometric analysis, but at the same time it is not that if you pick one and then you are only entitled to do that. You can also go for all of them depending on your need. So, here we summarize this lecture. So, again in this case we have understood the meaning of literature review, why it is required, because it is one of the backbone of making your research successful, to identifying the gap of your research and thereby framing the questions and doing actual research. So, steps in literature review we have discussed: selection of literature sources from different database. I have given you few options, but okay, there are other few options also available, but these are very commonly used sources. And again it is which are available online, but beyond that maybe you have something very important document in the library or in other website. So, you can also refer that. Then types of literature review, 4 types I have just mentioned briefly, then we will discuss in detail for each of them in this particular part. So, here is the summary of the first lecture on this literature review module. So, we will be coming up with our next lecture, that is on bibliometric analysis, that is lecture number 12. So, till then thank you for joining. So, we will see you soon.